And welcome to today's work session. Today is Monday, April the 26th, 2021. The time is now 3 p.m. The Zoom work session of the City Council of the City of Trinidad will now come to order. First of all, I want to say thank you for the interest that is shown in what we're having to discuss today. According to the number of participants, today we have 45. Initially, we are going to have 5 people or 6 people that want to speak, that have pre-mentioned that they wanted to do a presentation. And then after that, we will open it up to anybody who wants to speak. So raise your hand and these people will monitor you and let me know, and we can address you and you can go ahead and speak whatever you want to address. I wanted to say, we all know that here in Trinidad and Los Angeles County, there's a big shortage of housing, but we're not unlike any other community in this country. Just this morning, I saw where the entire United States, there is housing, a 4 million housing shortage in the United States today. And so the high cost of building doesn't seem to be deterring anybody from building at this point in time. So it really boils down to being able to build quickly, good quality, and efficiently to keep that cost down. So those are the things that I really see is important to anyone who wants to build, whether it's here or in the other part of the country today. So we have, just to let you know, the list of people that we've listed here, and we'll begin. We have David Baca Construction, Dion Ortiz Performance Builders, Dana Crawford for Urban Neighborhoods, Kevin Calibari, Glenn Moulter for PVC Incorporated, and Carl Gabrielson for Trinidad Development Group. And then after that, we'll have an open discussion and other public comments after that. So let's go ahead and get started with David Baca Construction. Whoever is Representative David Baca, if you want to give us your presentation and how you see the local housing market and how you can address it, what if you have any plans to do so.
Well, first off, we'd like to thanks for being invited to this housing forum. I'm Rich Olguin. I'm standing in for David Baca. He had a funeral that he had to attend and he really wanted to be here, but I'm in his stead. We were asked what challenges do we see, and the biggest challenge that we see is lack of building sites or locations to build. Obviously, the material costs that have gone up are a big impact on houses to be built or the ones that are being built at the moment. But right now, our largest challenge we see is the lack of building sites. We've been actively looking for building sites. David was in the process of purchasing or looking at a site that would hold about 18 homes. That didn't go through, which we're sad about. So he's looking for individuals that would want to sell property. We're thinking about bringing up with the city lots that are being condemned or homes that are being condemned, if those would be available for contractors to build on. And then we also talked about possibly seeing if any of the sites out at Cougar Canyon that the city may possibly have tax liens against would be available. David is very interested in this. We think we can build good homes. Even though we're a custom home builder, we are wanting to build and help the city grow as well. So we are looking for going down that avenue as far as building affordable housing for people that want to move here or that currently live here and need a home.
Rich, have you maybe even looked maybe in the close proximity to the city of the city, uh, but just the city itself, right? Which would be in the county. Have you looked at any lots in that in close proximity?
Yeah, David's actively looking at some in the county. Uh, we're trying to keep it a little more closer to Trinidad. Some of the reason being, obviously, is the utilities side, water and power. Some of the sites that we are looking at out in the county either have issues with getting or the people having to haul water or bringing power to the site. In some instances is pretty costly because of the distance that lines would have to travel. So that's what makes the city ones a little more enticing to look for.
Okay. Anything else, Rich?
No, other than just that, what I just mentioned there. And part of that for the affordable housing would obviously be the ability to have electric, water, those types of things a little closer on hand, where it would keep the cost down the homeowner.
Okay. Okay, Rich, thank you for that and for that information. I wrote down what you mentioned, and I'll do that with everyone that speaks today. Let's go on to Dion Ortiz from Performance Builders. Dion, are you on?
Hi, we're here. It's Lori. Dion's working right now,
Okay.
so he wasn't able to get here. But along the lines of what Rich was saying, we are actively as well looking for some of the condemned lots around the city and a few other things, just to do what we can to just build up the city. We know housing is super hard and to find, and that's why we went got busy this year and fixed up the development we have up on 7th and Ash and getting that done. But the same thing along the lines like what Rich is saying, where supplies are so expensive. Even just OSB board is just through the ceiling. So it's a lot of material costs that are probably slowing things down a little bit.
Okay.
But along the lines of where the city is with us, I mean, I think all of us contractors have a super good relationship with Kent and Victor over at City Hall. And there's not too much there that I can see, since I do most of the paperwork, that of issues that we have with the city supporting us or being as focused as they can, helping all the contractors, because they do. We haven't really looked at any lots outside of the city limits, just again because of just to reiterate what Rich said, it's just those expenses are just a little too much for what we'd see people wanting to come into town to do.
Okay.
But we've just utilized some of the funding, unfortunately through COVID and the SBA loans and things like that. That's another thing with financing. I'm not sure what fell through with David for some of those bigger purchases and stuff like that. But unfortunately, we had to go outside of the city for financing. I wish we didn't have to, but one of the local banks that we've been with since 2005 just dragged their feet. And so we had to move from there. So that's probably a struggle for a few. But I mean, everything we keep local as much as we can, because we are extremely invested in Trinidad, and that's where we want to stay with all of our local insurancing, the comp, all that stuff. But again, like I said, it's just supplies and I think lack of space to build.
Well, like I say, you addressed a couple of items there, like you said, material cost lots, and also your banking issues. That's that's also can be a problem as well, and that's something that we have seen through the years. So it's just to a great degree that's something that's really not new, and I understand that. Okay, Lori, is there anything else?
No, unless you have any, like I said, any questions for me. I think all of us, local, just like David, we are just extremely invested in Trinidad. This is our home, and we are looking to do everything we can to beautify as much as we can and bring in as much as we can. That's the whole goal. The whole goal.
Okay. Thank you for that information. Let's go on to Dana Crawford from Urban Neighborhoods. Dana.
Thank you very much for letting me speak again. And my background picture is the theater. And in the theater, we ultimately will be able to have 4 housing units for visiting artists or creative people. And this is, the month of May is National Preservation Month. And certainly Trinidad is a great destination for historic buildings, and most of everything that I'm working on currently is an historic building. The East School will be starting there July 1, and I brought some slides, and I don't know whether they're going to be shown or not.
Well, I believe that probably Audra could help you.
Audra, do you have the slides?
I do. Give me just a second.
So anyway, the East School is going to be about 18 housing units, live work for artists. It'll be definitely a community center, and it will also have a culinary arts program in it, and a little manufacturing space, and a small cafe. And if you're familiar with the building, it is on the National Register of Historic Places, and it's a very important building in that regard, and it's really in pretty darn good shape. So there you have a picture of it as it looks today, and the next slide will show you what the plan is for it with the artist housing. And there it is. So it will be, I think, a great addition to that neighborhood. And here's one of the interior shots where people can live and work. And not everybody will be doing that. Some of them will not have the kitchen. I think they will all have bathrooms. And we're using the old school classrooms so that we don't have to go out and buy a whole lot of new material, because as the previous speakers have been saying, everything has become a lot more expensive. Then downtown, on the corner of Commercial and Main Street, the next slide is the wonderful, wonderful, important Columbian building, which has tenants on the first floor, and the second and third floor will become 18 condominiums for sale, and they will be kind of loft style, and they will be furnished also. So, and across the street from the Columbian is not this building. This building is on Pine Street, and it suffered quite a big flood last June, but it's in good shape. It has 10 little units upstairs, little dwelling units that can be renovated pretty easily. And it also includes a building. The next slide shows you what it will look like when it's finished. And on Arizona Street down there is a building that's in rather poor condition. However, we can get 8 units out of it, and they probably would be perfect for people that are teachers up at the school, at the college, or some of the people that are looking for housing. They'll be quite large, and we have some things to work out with the city. The next slide is the Jaffa Opera House, which is immediately across the street from the Columbian Hotel. And this building has a reputation for being in really bad shape structurally, and my architect called it a beast. But at any rate, it will have a commercial space on the first floor, and on the upper level, which used to be an opera house, it can be developed in such a way that it would be a boutique hotel that would have about 14 units in it, and it might be that those would end up being housing units, but this is going to be a really, really terrific building. And then, of course, I told you about the Fox West Theater. So, especially in the historic district, on the second floor, I'm hoping that Kayvon will talk about on those second floors up and down, especially Main Street and commercial, if they're in just spaces that are not used at this juncture and need to be rehabbed, that would really make a big difference downtown. When you have people living downtown, like, there's a sense that somebody's home, and it makes a huge difference in a community. So the Fox West Theater, I know I made a presentation to you not very long ago, but the next slide shows that there was a really pretty ugly marquee added on during the time, but the next slide shows you what the building looked like originally when it was built in 1908. So it had a really very handsome facade, and there it is. And then on the inside is the theater, which seats about 1,000 people, and there will also be space in there, as I said, for 4 units for creative people. So our emphasis is on creativity, reuse of historic buildings, and trying to be a very hopefully welcome part of Trinidad. I'll be available for questions later. Thank you.
Dana, just one real question I'm sure council would probably like to know. And of course, we know the theater, as far as that goes, developing those units is going to be a little further out. You mentioned that you're going to be starting shortly on Nice Street. What about the Columbian and the Pine Street building? Any idea of when you may start the renovation on those 2 projects?
Well, I hope sometime this year. I'm meeting some people that just bought the Toltec building down there on the 5th and the 6th, and they're interested in they are developers, and they actually get in and work in a space, which I have to confess I'm not very good at that. And so at any rate, they're interested in Pine Street and Arizona, and I don't really know exactly when we're going to get started on the Columbian, but I'm hoping it'll be sometime this year.
Okay.
COVID was not a very friendly partner this year.
Yeah, you're right. Dana, thank you for that information. Let's go on to Kayvon.
Mayor,
Yes,
We have Mark Gray from the New Elk Coal Mine has a question.
sure. Mark, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Rico. Question, Dana, I was really impressed with your short presentation, and I'm quite keen to meet with you and get a better sense of timing and what your requirements are for for possible forward leasing, forward purchasing of some of the units in your proposed developments.
Well, I'd be very happy to meet with you, and I imagine that I can get maybe Audra. Would you have the contacts for the gentleman from the coal company?
Yeah, Mark Gray, Dana. But Audra will give you my contact details.
Okay.
And yeah, that would be good. I in fact, we'll be in the San Luis County in about 2 weeks for the next couple of months. So with good social distancing, it would be good to meet and talk about and get better understanding of the timing around your developments,
Right.
and the mine's housing needs as well. Thank you, Mary.
Just for everyone's information, Mark Ray, he is the CEO of Allegiance Coal, who are the owners and operators of the new Alton. So, gives you a little bit of basic background information, and you know that they are beginning operations here shortly. So let's go on to Kayvan. Kayvan, are you listening in?
Yep, I'm here. Thanks, Mayor. And yeah, thanks for having me today. I did send some slides to Audra, if we don't mind getting those up.
Do you want me to share my screen, Kayla, or do you want me to do the slides?
If you don't mind doing them, that'd be great.
Okay, hang on just a second.
Yeah, and I tried to focus on, sorry for that beeping. Turn my phone off here. So I tried to focus on one part of this housing puzzle, and I think it's really important that we, do focus on the really dozens and dozens of tools that we have available to us on this housing fight. And I think if we're looking at one, I don't know why this is happening. I'm sorry. If we're just focusing on one, I think we're going to be in some trouble. From new builds to looking at how we can use existing resources, to looking at policy changes. I think there's a lot of things that we have to look at concurrently if we're going to really address this issue and the matter at hand. I really wanted to focus today on multifamily housing. I think a lot of folks to date have talked about single family, which no doubt is needed, and I'm going to be working on some of those items myself. Really hoping that we can maybe dig in a little bit more on multifamily housing and understand a little bit more the metrics of it, what some of the issues are, so that we can really inform folks within the city, but also just folks within Trinidad. I know there's a lot of folks on the call here, so hopefully this helps get some good information out there about what some of the roadblocks are. In some of the issues that we've talked about around short-term rentals in town, I've heard some people say that really housing starts are the big issue here. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, but I'm not sure that maybe a lot of folks understand why some of those housing starts are slow to come. Folks think, I think if we build it, that folks will come, but it's really not that simple. It's not easy to build these things in the first place. It's incredibly expensive. It's incredibly time draining, especially on the multifamily front. And I just wanted to try to paint a picture of why folks aren't building in the great numbers to meet the demand that we currently have. As I mentioned, really the main issue is the expense here, and that's been addressed here on this call already. But to kind of paint a picture, to build for sale housing in Trinidad doesn't make a lot of financial sense without really enormous and largely unavailable subsidies to bring those costs down. Currently, the cost to build housing is anywhere from 60 to 100% more expensive than homes are currently selling for in Trinidad. And as we learned about on the last housing forum, while market prices are pushing up, I don't believe that we really want them to go too high because we ruin that affordability piece, which is something that's actually very desirable in Trinidad. It's really necessary at the end of the day for a town that's really leaning on tourism and the hospitality industry as a major part of its economy. I'm of the belief that we must preserve housing as much as possible for low-wage workers and their families. I'm in Salida right now, for example, and there's 2 houses for sale on Zillow if you go search, and they are selling for between $450 and $700 a square foot. And that is not uncommon for small communities in Colorado, especially desirable ones. I think we all know Trinidad's headed in that direction. So, my hope is that I can be a part of changing direction and being a part of something different than we've seen a lot of mountain towns go. To build rental housing is not really financially appealing either. Really low rents because of the low area median income, combined with really the lack of high quality property management in town to manage these properties. I find it really hard to believe that we're going to see a lot of developers take any significant risk to build new construction for rental housing. When the developers do, and I think we have a lot on this call that are going to do that, take that risk, it's going to be on single family housing, which again is great and necessary. But I'm really of the opinion that, you know, multifamily and building some density downtown is going to be really important to infill the land that we do have. There are some lots available, which I'm going to talk about, to utilize the infrastructure that we already have, obviously. Trinidad's downtown is already becoming very congested. And I think the more that we can create a walkable city, a bikeable city, keep folks living downtown, that are working downtown, that are playing downtown, I think it's something that we should hopefully start prioritizing to further that congestion, or to limit the furthering of that congestion. You know, the city has already experienced issues with horizontal growth and extending infrastructure to accommodate. We saw that with the recent water tap moratorium. I know that's over, but things like that, and just the sheer cost of extending these utilities is no small cost. And pushing that on to developers, especially with the cost of construction already, it's going to make it very unlikely that they're going to take that chance to pursue new housing starts in Trinidad. If you don't mind going to the next slide, Audra. So as an example, I just wanted to show a lot that we're working on building some multifamily housing on and in the planning phases of. This is at 516 East Elm Street. So it's right next to the Trinidad Depot, which we have, or very will soon have permit on to build the interior to support a pizzeria, a brewery, and hopefully a bike and fly shop in the depot. But adjacent to it, there's about 3/4 of an acre lot that we'd like to build something similar to what I have a partner who's a developer working on in Denver. He's also a partner on this property, and we're going to try to use a similar model and template down here for that. You know, beyond the significant cost of these housing starts, it also takes a lot of time. We don't just build housing, especially multifamily housing. There's a lot of planning and process that goes along with that. There's collaboration with a myriad of stakeholders that must take place. And I'm going to try to expand on that a little bit here. I've been doing work in Trinidad really for less than a year to date, and we acquired this property just about 4 months ago. So it's still very new to us, but I think you should expect to see something come across your desk here very shortly on more specific plans for this. But based on the applied zoning, the density incentives that we have for affordable housing in Trinidad, we believe that we can do 24 units here over 3 stories. This would be a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. These would all be for sale condos. And there's some work to do on subdividing the lot because it is all one parcel at this time, and condominiumizing them. And the process that goes along with that, those are not short processes. We've also had to engage in phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments to really understand the site's issues. Since it was an old train depot, there were some gas and oil works across the street. We've started those processes because not only do we need them really just for our peace of mind and to make sure that we're building on clean soil, we'll probably also need them to procure bank financing to build on this site. So we've already started that process. We should have it completed in the next month. The city, particularly Georgian Planning, has been very helpful in getting this done and really doing it at no cost to us by working directly with the EPA and their consultants to get them down here. So again, we're on the tail end of that process. But the work ahead of us is really in the planning process and to garner the necessary approvals from the city, which is still probably a couple months out, which all really highlights the time it takes to do this process correctly. If you don't mind going over to the next slide, Audra. So I wanted to try to, describe a little bit about whether if we're doing market rate housing versus something that's affordable and then eventually subsidized by some of the entities that we'll talk about. If we are building market rate housing, it really means that we're taking 0 subsidies or grants, and we're letting the free market handle it. I think we're going to find that if we build at the market rate, for some of the comments on this call, we're going to find that prices are anything but market for Trinidad. The break even, and I want to stress that the break even, so no profit involved for this type of development, results in an average sales price of $275,000 for a 1,000 square foot unit. If selling these at the current cost per square foot rate in Trinidad, they would command about $120,000 per unit. I think the top sales cost per square foot that I've seen for sales is about 120 bucks. So I think that, I find it hard to believe that, the workforce and families are going to be willing to pay that compared to current Trinidad prices. It means a family of 3 must make $66,000 a year to keep their housing costs within the recommended expense to income ratios. It might be possible for some, and we certainly do need some higher income earners to be in Trinidad, to live in Trinidad, to move to Trinidad. But it's really unrealistic for most people in the area based on the current median income. Especially I talked about it earlier, as hospitality and tourism grows in this town, we're going to have more and more folks making between $13 and $20 an hour. And this is a price point that is really just beyond their reach. The current minimum wage in the area is $12.32 per hour, which equates to an annual wage of $25,000 plus. So even having 2 people making that wage in Denver still would not be able to afford, this baseline unit without these subsidies involved. Not only do we not want pricing to be this high, I have a tough time believing that these units would sell at that market rate. Again, it's not market rate, and we really need to work out a way to build some more financial support into these housing starts. That doesn't mean building market rate is out of the question, as again, we do need that higher income housing. But as someone who owns restaurants and ones that do pay well, more than most, and as someone who is supporting many other hospitality businesses coming to the area, opening to the area, I'm really worried about housing for these workers. And frankly, as a father, I'm worried about housing for families that are going to be priced out of Trinidad eventually, if they go the way of most other towns that have been through a similar arc as us. Next slide, please. So then looking at something subsidized, if we're looking at subsidies, that means we're taking, some level of financial support from city, county, state, federal governments, nonprofits, other entities that are there to support housing starts. It also means that we're bringing in other stakeholders to shoulder some of this burden with us. And to get subsidies and to earn these partnerships, we must ensure affordability. To be considered affordable, we must develop housing that is priced for folks at or below 80% of the area median income threshold, which in Los Animas County is $41,200 for a single person. Understanding the $20,000 minimum wage in the area, I dropped this down to 70% AMI in the example, just to get a little closer to that number. Using the project in Denver that I mentioned as a model for what we're aspiring to on the slot in Trinidad, we hope to partner with entities such as Elevation Community Land Trust, Colorado Department of Housing. We're also attempting to acquire other non-debt funding opportunities. CHAFA is already in the mix as well, because they do have a funding relationship with Elevation already. So we're discussing with them these projects as well. And I think the AMI levels are pretty clear, but if you have any questions, let me know. You can see that for a 3-member household, 3-bedroom home, really that mark is $46,000, which again is far below that market rate of $66,000 that I had in the previous slide. So using this 24 unit example that we're talking about on Elm Street to maintain these limits on affordability and to have a final sales price that's in line with them, this project, based on what we would expect construction costs to be, has about a $2.8 million funding gap, which is about $120,000 per unit or door, as they'll say. So that's not a small number to make up, especially only on 24 units. This does mean that we would have to take significant subsidies, but again, also looking to encourage the city to support us how they can. It's already been mentioned, utilities especially. Getting support on that front would be great. Getting some consideration for even increasing density a little further on lots like this that can support it, something we'd love to look at. Next slide, please. So this is the project that I'm talking about in Denver as an example. This is the first of 3 that my business partner, Jeff Shanahan, is working on. This one is set to be done in June, and he's got another one in the Rhino District in Denver and another one over by the new Meow Wolf opening up. And these are really in neighborhoods that have seen a lot of growth, development, increased housing prices over the last few years. So when you're looking at the 92 units that are in this building and the prices that come along with them, they may be a bit of a shock because they might be out of out of touch with Trinidad prices. But if we're talking about comparing this to Denver, those prices listed for studios, 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms are about half of what you can find traditional market rate housing for sale on the market right now. It did take $6.2 million in subsidies, or over $67,000 a door, to build this, to allow for these units to be sold at these low prices. And that was done in partnership with those entities listed there. I will acknowledge that this building is all concrete and steel construction. I think that's very important. It looks a little different in this promo picture here. But it's a heck of a lot more aesthetically appealing than a lot of stuff going up in Denver right now. It's not the low quality stick frame construction that, say, the Space to Create on Elm is, and I think that's really important. I think we really need to make sure that we're not just putting up slop to deal with this issue, that we're building things that can last, that we're doing it at a quality that's going to endure. And this is a building we intend on having be around a while. This is probably the most novel part of this whole project is that these units are restricted as affordable because of the subsidies involved for 200 years. Now, generally, you see a 10 to 15 year deed restriction on affordability because they get city money or state money, and then after that, these units go to market rate. But in the agreement that we have with Elevation Community Land Trust, who is managing the deed restrictions on these property, we are keeping them at a controlled appreciation for 200 years after the sale of these units. And I think that's important because affordability in Trinidad is not just going to be an issue today. It's going to be in 10 years from now, 30 years from now, 100 years from now. And I think we need to consider that in a part of our planning if we're going to do it right and build a city that remains accessible to everyone in perpetuity. So how do we do this in Trinidad? If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. So with our gap that we have here, I mentioned $2.8 million earlier. That's $117,000 per door. We have Elevation Community Land Trust. We feel confident in them providing about $30K per door, $720,000. The Department of Housing coming to the table with about $600,000 or $25K per door. And then there's some USDA grants available. Unfortunately, not too many related to housing, but we believe we can get anywhere from 2 to 10K a door. So what else can we do? What I've seen in New Mexico doing some work down there is that a lot of these grant opportunities, especially with the USDA, have not seen the participation that they really wanted to. And they've had developers, municipalities, other stakeholders go to USDA and other grant givers and say, can we expand access to these to see if we can get more money coming to projects that are actually in need. There's a reason some of that existing money is not being used, is because maybe the intent of them doesn't match really the need of the communities that they're meant to serve. So one of the ones that I really looked at that could be an option here is the Community Facilities Direct Loan and Grant Program that the USDA offers. We're intending on partnering with Elevation. We've partnered with the city in the past on these projects, so the nonprofit requirement associated with that isn't a big hurdle. But what they don't have in their allowances is housing as a use for this money, and it's big because they're willing to pay in a community the size of Trinidad up to 55% of the project costs in communities with fewer than 12,000 people and having a median household income below 70% of the state levels for median income. So I think there's things like that and other grant programs that maybe aren't currently accessible that we could use our leverage as a municipality to chat with folks and see if we can get some of that money released for things that we do need, like housing. But as was mentioned earlier, I think other things that the city could hopefully do is help eliminate utility fees and hookups related to water, electrical, gas, and sewer, eliminating fees and permitting and approvals. Those are great. They're not going to be huge on a multifamily project. That definitely those numbers do add up. But every little penny that we can really save at this point does help. I mentioned the potential for greater density would be really great. It would also open up more funding opportunities and really lower the cost per door for some of these subsidies that we're getting from these entities. If we could build more units on some of these sites, I do believe some of the funding opportunities, especially from state organizations, is going to increase. And I'd really love us to think, and I know the city isn't flush with cash, but I'd really love us to think about setting aside some money if not for projects like I'm talking about here, some lower cost options related to the fixing up of the dilapidated homes, the condemned homes in Trinidad, accessory dwelling units, things of that nature. Next slide, please.
Hey, Kayvon, while he's switching that, this Councilman Goodall, I didn't know if you noticed in the chat part, you got a message to the property developers from the New Elk mine. Says this company would be willing to help with the funding gap with targeted projects. So someday you ought to also get Audra to share that information for his information so that you can get hold of Mark also and have discussions with him, because that can be a possibility to help with funding gaps.
That's great. I appreciate that, Rusty, and thank you, Mark. Mark and I sat down a couple months ago, and housing was really at the top of our list of things that we did discuss. And I know at the time, Mark, you mentioned you were very interested in supporting housing solutions here. So I would love to sit down now that some of these projects are becoming more real and see how we can do that. These are some of the other things I'm working on. Oak Street Estates, which is something that I think Glenn's going to talk about here coming up after me, which starts with 40 single family homes and then has a phase 2 with future multifamily development. The East Street School, I think I undercut Dana on those condo numbers, I'm sorry, but definitely supporting her on that, and things like the Pine Street project as well. And I don't have Carl's project on here that they're going to be talking about here pretty soon, but I love working with Carl and would love to support that. And I think it really takes that kind of collaboration amongst all us to get this done. So I want to make it clear to anybody that's interested in building housing here, even the folks I haven't met, that if there's ways that we can come up with investment, come up with creative ideas to this issue, and please count me as an ally in that process. Some other sites that I have control over that I'm going to be presenting hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months to the city for housing starts include 322 East North Avenue, which I'm hoping to do as a really novel concept around co-housing. It brings the cost down. So, thinking about folks like that work in a mine, where, they may be here for a few years, they may be on more shorter term contracts. They might not need a full unit with a kitchen, with a bathroom, or not a bathroom, but a kitchen, the living spaces, some of the entertainment spaces. We can have private apartments that are almost more dormitory style, where they do have a private bathroom, they do have a private living space and a bedroom, but they have more larger shared common areas, commercial kitchens, things like that. Really brings the cost of units for construction down considerably. And that's something I hope to pursue at 322 East North Avenue. I'm working with a co-living architect up in Boulder and hope to present some ideas on that here in the coming months. 801 San Pedro is the church at the commercial exit. We're currently working on restoring the exterior of that, but I hope to turn that into 1 to 3 living units at the end of it. And then there's a number of single family home lots that I have in town that are really just waiting. I've talked with Glenn Mulcher about doing some things on here, but I know some of the folks on the call mentioned that there are no units in town or vacant land that they can build on. I want to make those 4, Godding, Spruce, Convent, and Vine, available to solutions. So I'd love to chat with folks about that and really make sure that, I'm not interested in profiting, honestly, on any of these. Same goes with the housing on Elm Street. I want to build housing because I know it's going to be necessary for the types of businesses that are in Trinidad, including some of my own. And then I'm also working on some housing opportunities in Raton, New Mexico, which I'm really excited about. Because I think, as you all know, as Trinidad goes, so does Raton. And I think it behooves us to support both those communities in solutions here. And then last slide is next, and then I'll shut up. In the meantime, what else can we do? I think our best bets are to preserve our existing housing stock. Contrary to some of the popular rumor mongering in town, not putting out a ballot initiative to ban short-term rentals, but I do think we need to understand this issue better and have good data to make informed and good decisions on this topic. And I think that really has a lot to do with looking at doing a registry. I think it's the only way that we're going to understand this problem, have good data, to have real conversations about this and understand if it's an issue or not. And if it's not, great, let's drop it and let's move on. But I know, based on conversations that I've had with many folks that don't live in Trinidad, They are investing heavily in some of these properties and are turning them into short-term rental without really having any consideration for the future of Trinidad. I don't know how many homes are on the condemnation list, and I really appreciate the program that TSJC has. I think it's going to be great for building the skilled trades folks that we need in this town. But I know that it's not going to be enough. I was talking with Danielle Rollo a few months ago, and I think she had mentioned maybe there was 50 to 80 homes on that list at one point. And I think, whatever we can do to have the city work with some of these builders in town to make those more move-in ready on a shorter timeline, I think that's a great way to see a little bit of money move in a pretty quick direction towards making units available. And then, I think we need to get creative, and we need to not just allow certain things, because there's a lot of things that get hidden in policy and code and in ordinances and rules that the everyday person isn't going to really understand what's a realistic outcome in some of those. So I think, having the city expressly allowing certain things like ADUs, marketing them as opportunities to homeowners, educating on how to get them done, I think is really important. I think a lot of people don't know what's possible because of the disconnect between, again, these rules and ordinances and having real life examples. So if we could have the city work with, some of the folks like myself who are trying to promote solutions in town, if we can help realize some of these new ideas and get the wheels turning in folks' heads, I think that would be great. Having a showcase ADU, having a showcase of, some of these really, really awesome new modular units that are out there that you can't even tell are modular or, container, I think would really set people's mind at ease about some of the misinformation regarding them and set a good example of what's possible. I think some of the creative things we could do are reducing the minimum lot size for single family homes. I know some of the ones I control are less than the 6,000 square foot minimum that the city has currently. And I realize we could probably apply for exceptions to that rule and build houses, but it would be nice to not have to go through that process and spend the time of someone like me who wants to build a house on this lot, not waste the resources of the city in approving these kinds of things. We have a lot of 4,000 and 5,000 square foot lots in this town, and it would be great if we could utilize them for single family home construction. In line with that, it would be cool to see a reduction of the minimum home size for single family homes. I'm not talking about 100 square foot homes, but even 100 square feet in some certain cases would go a long way, even allowing for horizontal density. So if you have a 6,000 square foot lot, allowing us to do two home units on it, understanding that people live in a way these days that they want smaller accommodations, they want a smaller yard that they don't have to spend so much time and effort and money taking care of. I think these are things we can look at. Again, prioritizing the development of accessory dwelling units. They're great not just for providing a low-cost option to build, but also a price point to rent that is less than a lot of what you'll see around town, while also providing an income opportunity for some of these folks in their house. For multi-generational people that have lived in this house for decades and decades, they're starting to deal with the wear of maintenance. They're starting to deal with they will eventually property taxes rising, utilities rising, and if you're on a fixed income, that's very, very difficult to deal with even a small increase in costs. So to have that rental income available in an ADU on those properties, I think is a great way to build that horizontal density. Expressly allowing some of these modern prefabricated housing solutions, as I mentioned, IndyDwell being one of many options that are out there. And then allowing for prioritizing and incentivizing creative housing development opportunities like tiny home villages, co-housing scenarios, things of that nature. I think not only is it meeting people where they live and how they live today, but it really puts Trinidad at the forefront of, these aren't new ideas, they've worked in other places, but really showing that we're willing to look forward and come up with interesting solutions to our problems. And then honestly, doing whatever the heck it takes to get Cougar Canyon back up and running. I know that's not an easy thing. I understand that's a multi-million-dollar problem, and as you'll see from this presentation, though, building 24 units is also a multi-million-dollar problem to the tune of a 2.8 gap on 24 units. So the city prioritizing a Cougar Canyon remedy, which would open up hundreds and hundreds of unit development opportunities for which infrastructure is already in place for, I think is a tremendous investment, and there's no better time than the present really to act on that. So I will be quiet now and happy to take any questions, but again, really appreciate the opportunity to present.
Van, thank you for the information. One thing I just wanted to address real quick with you, you talked about ADU units. We did address that here recently in one of our ordinances, and it is in there. If you want to come in and talk to Georgie or Kent or Mike, that way he can fill you in as to what that ordinance says. So,
Yeah, and really quick, I guess I should have mentioned, I realize it's in there, but to my point, I guess, about people not understanding the process, if there's a way that we could allow homeowners to understand it better, if we could work on putting together financing packages for them, if there's a way that I think we could make it more tangible to people that are existing homeowners in this town, we might, create homeowners in town that become pseudo developers in really allowing this ordinance to be used to its full potential. But I appreciate that comment.
okay. Hey, let's go on to Glenn Moulter from the president of PVC Incorporated. Glenn?
Mayor,
Yes.
this is Audra. Glenn Moulter had his hand raised, and so did Lori Ortiz. And so, before we hear from Glenn, if they have questions for Kayvon, I think
Sure.
we could open the floor to them.
Sure, that'll be fine. Glenn, do you have a question for Kayvon?
No, actually, earlier, Mayor, when you guys were, hi everybody, talking to Dana there with all the great ideas and stuff that's happening down Trinidad. My question was for the city of Trinidad, and what do they see as far as parking in the downtown area? If we're, does the city have any plans for parking down there? It's kind of crazy now. I'm renting my new office space from Dana down there in the Columbian building, and it's hard for me to find a place to park on some certain days, and I was just wondering what the city had planned there.
Mr. Valentine, you want to address that?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. It's kind of hard to find parking when there's no areas to put parking. So I think the walkability, bikeability option is there. Parking is not a real strict requirement in the historic preservation area because of we know that it's finding off-street parking is tough. So we've looked at a lot of scenarios. You think building housing is expensive, try building a parking garage. It is out of this world costly. So we're willing to work with everybody, but we've come to the realization that, unless we tear down some historic structures and build parking lots, we're going to have to change the model and go with walkability and having people move in down there that are working down there. So I know it's not an answer, but we'll take any suggestions. We've kind of thought about this a lot, but no answers for you, Glenn. Sorry.
Hey, Glenn, there, I know I've looked around, and I'll bring it to Mike. We've had some minor discussion, but we own the lot that used to be the old, what's it called,
Gary?
the old dairy. So we looked at that to possibly turning that into a parking lot. So that would be one area that is in close proximity to the downtown area. So that is one possibility, which is actually close to where your office is currently located. It's not too far away.
Yeah, I need parking for myself. Okay, you guys can answer whoever was next, and then I'll get into my little chat there.
Okay, Lori, you had your hand raised.
I did. It was just on an earlier comment Kayvon made about rental properties and lack of property management. I don't want to misquote him, so I don't want to repeat what he said and misquote him, but what experience have you had with some of our local property managers that makes you feel this way? Because 14 of the 16 properties I own in Trinidad are managed by a local realty company that I am fully satisfied with. So is there a possibility maybe you haven't come across the right person?
I think that's, yeah, very possible. Most of my experiences to date have been pretty much literally talking to every person I know that has rental properties, telling me such. A lot of it was around commercial property management. I personally haven't dug into residential because I don't have any that I'm currently managing. So it's been really based in commercial, but I've asked for a lot of references, recommendations to folks that own a lot of properties in town, and nobody's been confident in giving me one. And then sorry about that, on the note of the Space to Create, I know that they had someone coming down from, I think, Denver. We just did a really, really poor job, and I think they found somebody that seems to be working well now. But I had just seen how, and seen it personally, you know, with some of the sidewalks and the cleanups and things like that, how poorly managed that was for quite some time. So you're right. I haven't witnessed it or experienced it firsthand. And if you do have recommendations, I would love to hear them and to chat with you about that.
Okay.
Actually, I do. It's Southern Colorado Realty that manages all of my residential properties, Danielle Rollo and Monica Violante, and the background checks and the work that they do for us is phenomenal. So that might be one you might want to look at.
I appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions for KVAN? Let's go ahead and move on to Glenn.
Mayor,
Well, I guess Karen.
Chair Diego.
Karen, go ahead. Go ahead, you have to unmute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Kayvon, you mentioned the City of Denver Housing Stability, that you got money from that organization. How are they funded? Does the City of Denver fund them? And what is their funding mechanism?
Pretty sure the majority of it comes from, and it's really worked against affordability, is collecting a payment in lieu of affordable housing being built. So if a 100-unit apartment building gets built in Denver, that developer can either choose to build in a certain number of affordable units into that, or pay a fee to the city so they don't have to. And they're going to pay that fee every single time because they're going to make a heck of a lot more money building and selling and renting market rate. But that's really where they've gotten it from. And with all the development that's occurred in Denver over the last decade, it's a pretty big pot, but not making nearly the impact it would if those developers had just put in 10% affordable into each of those new developments that's been built.
Okay, I have another question on, just for example, you mentioned your Elm Street development and how much money you'd need to be subsidized to make that housing project affordable to people. Okay, so, and then you mentioned several things that the City of Trinidad could do. So what, could you put a dollar amount on how much you would think, and I'm just wanting to know for an example, because there's about 5 or 6 housing projects we're talking about here that the city might be able to subsidize. So how much would you say you would need from the City of Trinidad to subsidize that? Just to give us an idea of what money we're talking about.
Yeah, it's really tough. You know, I think on the multifamily, because there's so many other things that go into that construction, and you know, structural costs are higher and utilities are higher because of larger services, and you know, connecting to a sewer main that might need to be upsized and all that. You know, even just the utilities, and I mean, it would make a huge impact, and we're talking probably a savings of a couple $100,000 or a few $100,000 on that. You know, I looked at, for example, a single family lot, that Vine Street property, where we've been having some issues with that gentleman trespassing on it. But assuming we get him off, you know, Glenn Mulcher's offered to do some site work, some underground work, some pad work for something like an indie dwell. You know, on that, even a $10,000 bump on a single family home would, I think, go a long way to supporting these being profitable for folks to do it. And as soon as you can make it even a little bit profitable for folks, I think you're going to see development increase pretty dramatically. But on a, the indie dwell property, I think we're talking about a set $60,000 or $70,000 unit price, probably another $20,000 in site work and utilities, and maybe a cost of land of $5,000 to $10,000. That's about $100,000 property, but it's also only building a 600 or a 500 square foot unit on it. So the sales price even to get over that is higher than what we're experiencing in Trinidad right now, sometimes twice as high. So it really depends on the development, but anything would go a long way. I don't expect the city to fill the gap of $2.8 million. That's unrealistic. I think, really focusing on something like Cougar Canyon and opening these infrastructured sites to new development would be a phenomenal place to start before giving someone like me subsidies and money to build.
Do you think, in your experience, what you've had in Trinidad so far, do you think there's a need or people would be interested in an indie type dwelling?
I think so, and I want to. I just use them because they're close.
Well, no, but I mean, we know it's a small unit because I've looked at their website, so I'm just trying to see if there's a demand for housing that small.
I know there are a lot of people that are stacked on each other in single family homes in Trinidad, and that's becoming more so every day, with more and more families, with more and more hospitality workers moving in with friends and taking an extra bedroom. These people that are getting stacked on top of each other, that's only going to increase in these single family homes. I have to believe that those folks would be very excited about moving into a 300 to 600 square foot home if we can make those available, even a tiny home. I mean, young people especially, some of these transient workers that are really there for seasonal work and things like that. I think these are a great way to alleviate the pressure on our larger housing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for K-Van? Okay, Glenn, go ahead and give us your presentation.
All righty. Everybody doing all right? Did you get blown to Kansas? Anyway, I'm speaking to you in the comforts of my truck because I'm out on a job site and I can't find enough people to help, so I got to be out here. Anyway, about 2005, we purchased some property up on South Oak Street to help alleviate the problem for blue-collar workers, people that work for me, people at the time working for Evergreen Natural Resources. And then the bottom fell out of it, so we kind of mothballed it. We did some work to that property. And then we mothballed it until the economy came back. Brought this in front of council about 3.5 years ago and 4 years ago. We were denied at the time. Nobody told me about. We were trying to shrink the lot sizes down to 4,200 square feet. We were denied, but nobody told us, hey, bring it back up. So we just kind of mothballed that project. Then I had a conversation with Mr. Valentine and said, if I brought them up to 6,000 square foot, come back in, what do you think? And he said, well, bring it, the housing crunch is on us and we do need help trying to find housing, especially, for the new mine coming in. We're really happy to see them back opening up, and we wish Mark and his team a great success up there. As you know, Trinidad was King Coal at one time. What we're proposing right now is a 6,000 square foot minimum, 39 single family units on South Oak Street. This project, from our investigation prior, getting with the utility department, the chief of police, the fire department, quite a few meetings back then. The capacity is there for the utilities, and so we would like to move forward with that project. If and when I get all my investors lined up, we're just moving a little slower now because we got kind of stung the last time, and I don't want to put a lot of hope into my investors in order for this not to move forward. We could have 12 buildable lots within 2 weeks of approval, and that would be huge start in Trinidad. We also own 60 acres on the west side of Trinidad, and I believe most of you people know where our Johnson Yard is. We have 60 acres back there, and I also have my best friend when I was in school owns 320 acres that abuts my property there. Problem that we're seeing, and you know, we want affordable housing for people that work hard every day, like me and my guys out here, is to be able to afford this housing. I'm running numbers now. I just got a call from one of my suppliers and says, you know, you got a bunch of electrical work to do. If you do, there's a shortage of electrical wire. And I said, well, not right at this moment, but they're only allowing them to buy 1,000 feet of electrical per 30 days right now. That's how much of a shortage just in electrical line there is out there. It's getting crazy. Originally, when we first started this idea, put numbers together, we thought we'd be able to get houses to people in the $150,000 to $200,000 range. This was back in 2007. Right now, you're pushing a minimum of 225,000 on up, closer to 300,000, and that's, I never thought I'd ever see them numbers in Trinidad, and I've been here, I'm fourth generation in this community. I don't believe without any, and I'm new to all of this, different grants and different things. We're trying to do research to see if there's money available out there, but these lots cannot be, part of the problem is, and I've talked to developers trying to get them down here, but obviously they're killing it up in Denver market, and they're not going to come down here for our little problem. So we're trying to do it with ourselves, with our pull some investors in, and still be able to make a few dollars for the investors and get an affordable house for somebody out there. And right now, to keep that cost down for affordable housing without some kind of help out there, I don't know if it's possible to do. It's just getting crazy. The OSB board's up to $57 a sheet. We used to buy that for $8 a sheet. You know, it's just on and on. I'm a modular home dealer also, which is stick-built homes, not a trailer. And right now, one manufacturer, if I ordered a house today, is 18 months out. My main manufacturer is about 8 months out. So, I mean, there's such a high demand out there. Affordable housing you have to have a mix of custom built houses, and you got to have manufactured houses, because manufactured houses can be brought in cheaper than on-site built, for sure. I also, earlier, Mayor, I believe you asked Rich O'Gean with Baca Construction if he looked at building lots outside the city limits. What is the restrictions of the city? I have property outside the city limits also. My family own quite a few different pieces of property. What's the possibility of getting external water taps now?
We do. Mr. Valentine, why don't you go ahead and address that?
So we revised our ordinance on water conservation, and extraterritorial water taps 3/4 inch are available. What I would say though, they are. And what I would say is, if you have an area that you're going to possibly develop more than 5-6 homes on, and we also have the opportunity to create an association with a master meter and go from there. But what I would add to in this answer is, for all developers and builders, please come into the city and let's chat. Let's not just badmouth the city's rules and regulations. We spent years going through this land development code, getting it to where it's at, and I know times change, but it took many meetings. So if you have an idea, before you spend a lot of money, let's sit down and chat. But long-winded answer, extraterritorial water taps are available.
So, Mike, we obviously, we have our own water association for our family, and we actually belong to 3 other water associations. So if I had an area that I wanted to put 5 or 10 homes on, I could do a water association tap, and you guys would be fine with that? Or come in and talk to you?
Exactly. I'm not going to say, go ahead. It's not, there are some rules to go through and discussion, and you're going to have an engineered study on, what size your water line needs to be and what size tap and everything. But it is definitely a possibility, and we'll work with you.
Okay, one more question, since we're on the subject of water associations. Is the city going to allow any more water taps on Sunflower Valley? Because we own property on the east side of Trinidad also, not just the west side.
So we've over the years had many discussions with Sunflower Valley. It depends on their main size and what capacity and volume they can carry out there. Plus, you would have to work through them, since we have a master meter with them, and then I believe they may have some taps out there. It's a different situation that we will not let happen again, but it is out there, and that's where the water association agreements would come in. But I would check with whoever the president of the Sunflower Valley is.
Okay. All right. Well, I think if anybody has any questions, I mean, and a big bag of money, where the Moulter family is always open to people investing in our projects. I always got good ideas. I don't know about money to go with it.
Are there any questions for Glenn? Well, let's move on then to Carl Gabrielson from the Trinidad Development Group. Carl?
Mayor, I'll interrupt before Carl gets started. Somebody with a 846-2478 number has raised their hand.
Okay, go ahead. Whoever that is, go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Council. I did have a question for Glenn, if you don't mind. Glenn, can you give me an average price of what your modular homes are going for a small 1,200-1,300 square foot home?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, it just depends. You know, it's like buying a car. You know, you could have they got a base price, and then you know it's just like you want a CD player, you want a DVD player type deal, you want to upgrade your
Right. No bells and whistles, just the base price.
But what did you say about a 1,200 square foot home? Is that what you said?
Yeah, 1,300 square foot. You know, City View Heights, we have both. We have stick built and we do have manufactured homes.
Oh, okay.
And I am still getting phone calls on manufactured homes for the development, so I was just wondering what your prices were. Just a basic price. I'm not holding you to it, just a basic price.
Delivered, you're looking at about $120,000 to $140,000 range.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Carl, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the city, as well as all the participants, trying to tackle a problem we've had coming for a couple of years. And as everyone knows that's involved with these problems, I think there's a lot more problems than there are solutions. You know, there are challenges. It is getting very expensive in the current market to develop real estate, and as Kayvon has shown you, the for-profit sector or the private sector right now often doesn't make sense. With that being said, we do have a historic rehab and adaptive reuse project that I've been asked to talk a little bit about. It is the old Holy Trinity School site. Down on Church and Convent Streets. We are working on the design. We acquired it approximately 6 weeks ago. It was about a 2-year process to get that accomplished. We are working on design drawings right now, and then we'll go through and finalize the city entitlement process, which I anticipate to take somewhere in the 4 to 6 month range. Then we will begin construction. We have 2 different types of product happening in there. The first, there are 3 portions of the Holy Trinity School that have been constructed over the years. There's an east wing, a center wing, and then the west wing, also called the convent, closest to the library. The center and east wings, we will be developing into free market housing. They are apartments. It appears we can get approximately 30, maybe up to 32 units in those 2 buildings. They will be loft-style apartments, and will be, available as soon as we can complete them. It is an adaptive reuse. We will be trying to keep the historic character of the building and of the school site itself, while making it a modern apartment. The third portion of this structure is the convent, and we are doing something a little different there. It will be what is commonly called a youth hostel, or something akin to a hostel. It will be shorter term housing for the community. Affordable hotel rooms, or boutique hotel rooms is what they're generally called. And there's somewhere in the low 40 units available in there, or will be. Directly across the street from there is also the old Schneider Brewery. And it appears, we have not begun the design phase right now. They're actually doing some as-builts in the building as we speak. That we will be putting that into housing units as well. So between the 2 projects, there should be somewhere in the range of 120 to 130 units coming in the downtown area over the next 2 to 3 years. We're really excited about the opportunity to be able to bring some housing back in the downtown core. As you know, we've been hard at work on rehab projects and adaptive reuse projects in the downtown core for the past 5 years. Kayvon, you mentioned a co-housing project. I built a co-housing project, or was greatly involved with a co-housing project almost 25 years ago. I thought it was a fantastic project. I think Trinidad is the right place for something like that as well. Some alternative or slightly unique projects, whether it be tiny or small homes. I think there's also, me personally, I think it's a good place and a time to do something like that. You know, as far as Cougar Canyon, that's been mentioned numerous times. You know, as you know, I'm intimately aware of the pros and cons of Cougar Canyon, and I would love to see it come back to life in some way, shape, or form, and you know, contribute to the community rather than sitting there detracting from the community. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Any questions for Carl?
Mayor, you have a couple of hands up. Jay Gonzalez and Lauren Hoffman both have their hands up.
Okay, Mr. Gonzalez.
What is these units that are the going to be rentals, or are they going to be condos?
You're breaking up. Jay, you're breaking up.
Jay, your whole question was broken. You might need to. I don't know if you're going to need to reconnect or what, but we couldn't understand anything that you said.
It appears that he may be reconnecting. Mayor Lauren Hoffman is on.
Okay, let's go ahead and get Lauren. Lauren, please.
Sure. Hi, Carl. It's Lauren. I know we met about a month ago.
Yes, ma'am.
Good to be here, and thanks for sharing. Feel free to say if this isn't the right forum, but I think the biggest thing on my mind when I'm sitting in these discussions or getting plugged in is just resourcing and finding individuals that can help with some of the build efforts or revitalization efforts. And so the projects I've had to work on, I've had to call folks from Pueblo. So obviously I'd want to speak, you know, and develop partnerships with people locally, but I've just found lack of resources to be a struggle. And I don't know if there's another space or place talking about this. I'd be happy to bring it there, but I'm sure I'm not the only one.
No, Lauren, you're absolutely right. I think finding trades and the labor pool and labor force to develop, whether it be new housing or rehabilitation of existing buildings. Everyone on these calls is cognizant that it's a challenge. For ourselves, we started as purely a development company, Trinidad Development, and we formed a construction company, Trinidad Commercial Construction and Trinidad Construction Group, out of necessity, and started hiring in-house. And the necessity was not because there wasn't talented tradesmen and construction personnel in the community. It was solely about availability, that they were all booked solid and you know, very, and you know, I think challenging times cause, you know, or cause you to think outside the box, and it's exactly what we're trying to do. But you're right. Just as Glenn mentioned, the cost of construction materials going up, and right now they're going up at a rate of approximately 5% a month. That the availability of trades and contractors are another challenge.
Right.
But I wish I had some magic solution for you. Much like the housing challenge, I don't think there is a magic solution. A lot of hard work and a lot of great minds that they have here today coming together to try to figure out some smaller solutions.
Hey, Carl,
Right.
This is Phil, and Lauren. Just to your question, several years ago, a group tried to come together and put together a contractor association, and maybe it's time that maybe try to get resurrected, where contractors can get together and begin to work together. Like Glenn, he typed it in just a minute ago. Maybe teaming up with different trades, contractors can not only help the city. Will raise the questions that you guys have individually and together. So I think that there is something that can be said for maybe a contractors association going forward. So you guys, but that's up to the contractors if they want to come together as a group.
Absolutely. I think it's always worth considering. And the other thing that I didn't mention, and I saw Dr. Epper on here earlier at very least, is the new building trades program at the college. The college has stepped up, and they are attempting to help the community out with some of their needs. Building trades is one, as well as their trail building program. I'm really excited about. I think that
Right.
help our immediate solution, but it does help our quality of life issues, and I'm all for it. Thank you, TSJC.
Dr. Epper, are you still on?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Can you give us an update as to what is happening with the building trades program?
Sure. And thank you for that recognition, Carl. And thank you, Mayor. Happy to give an update. I have presented to City Council before about this program. So far, we are in our second cohort. Both cohorts have had 8 students. So we'll have 16 students trained by the end of next month. We'll do another 2 cohorts in June and July, and then another 2 in the fall. We have the capacity in this program to train about 90 students per year. And so long as students continue to sign up, we will continue training them. We are making a small dent in the housing redevelopment issue here. We have 2 houses over on Stonewall that we are renovating, and the students are getting great experience with some basic construction skills. And I know there are needs in the higher level, more specialized areas as well, which we are not pursuing those right now, but if contractors can come together with us, we'd be willing to look at developing those more specialized programs as well. But happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Dr. Epper?
I have a question, Doctor.
Go ahead, Karen.
I know you're doing a rehab on those Stonewall properties. Is there any possibility that the TSJC program could get in and help people, like elderly people that need just repairs or maintenance to their homes so their homes can be more livable for them? Is there any kind of program out there that you're contemplating doing?
Thank you for that question, Councilwoman Griego. And that is not currently part of our program. We're funded through the State Attorney General's office and have a specific charge in housing redevelopment. So we're addressing both the housing shortage issue as well as workforce development as far as training students. That's something that we might consider later on, but that's not currently part of our program.
So when you mentioned just before I asked the question about contacting contractors, so, you know, the college at one time had a great building trades program. A lot of good contractors came out of that program. Is there any possibility of resurrecting that program? Is that what you're alluding to when you mentioned that? Contractors contacting you?
So the building trades program is what we're resurrecting, but the way we're approaching it right now is to do short-term training. So we're doing 4-week certificate program. It's an 8-credit certificate that includes both classroom and on-site, on-the-job training. The goal is to get workers trained and out into the workforce as quickly as possible. In the past, we had a longer term construction program that led to a full applied associate's degree. And the reason that that program closed was because students stopped coming. And we couldn't sustain the program. If we don't have students enrolling, then it's hard for us to keep a program going. One of the reasons that students stopped coming is because there wasn't an advantage to their wages going into the workforce for having that associate's degree. So with this effort, we're hoping that some short-term training, basic job skills, as well as safety, carpentry, framing, just, basic entry-level construction trades training would help get the workforce moving and get some good workers out in the community to help the contractors. If we have a great demand for training in some of the specialized areas, and we have assurance that those students could get jobs, then we'd be able to look at starting another program. But if there's only a need for, let's say, 2 or 3 plumbers in the community, it's really tough for the college to invest in a programming and faculty members to train only a handful of students.
Okay, thank you. Will you give us an update on the program that is going on now, that with the 16 students that you've trained? Are they in the workforce, or what's happened to them?
Yes, so 8 of them have finished the program, and I'm not sure if they've taken their exam. There's a national certificate exam they take at the end of it for the NCCER trades certificate, but they are, if they want to be out in the community working, then they're available to be. I don't know how many of them are working, but they finished their program at the end of March, and the new cohort just started last week, and they're making good progress on the homes on Stonewall. They actually are starting with the home on the west side, and I encourage anyone to go out and take a look because the students are really proud of their work. We've actually been approached by several prospective buyers wanting to know when the houses will be available. So that's something we'll be facing later on in the summer when the first one is complete.
Do you mind giving us the address on Stonewall, Dr. Epper?
Sure, it's 920 and 926.
Okay, thank you much.
Donna Haddo chatted in. Donna, do you want to go ahead and give us some information what you were chatting in about?
Sorry, I had trouble finding my buttons. I wasn't expecting to have to say anything. The Council of Governments program, is that what you're referring to, Mayor?
Yes.
So they've had that program there for many, many years. I worked there probably over 15 years ago. It's a low to moderate income program. They can go in, they can replace the roof. They do a lot of repairs on bathrooms. Sometimes somebody just needs a septic tank put in. But I believe Lonnie Medina is Stevie Medina, I think it's Stevie, is the contact out there at COG for that program. The only problem they do have is the price when it gets up to $25,000. If there's any asbestos or I believe it's lead, then it kind of keeps them under that $25 limit. But they've done a lot of work over the years, and I've seen them advertising actually in the paper lately, which is something they never used to do. So I'm thinking they must be low on applicants. So that'd be something that you guys could really help get the word out for people to get homes repairs. Some of the people have like, $20 or $30 a month payments is all. A lot of the loans are no interest. It's a great program, and it would be good if they had some more applicants out there. I happen to be on the loan committee now, and I haven't had any loan applications to review for a little bit, so I think they're low on applications.
Okay. Thank you for that information, Donna.
Sure.
let's go ahead and open it up to anybody else. Like I said, we have 56.
Mayor, Mr. Gonzalez has called back in if he wants to try again.
Sure. Jake? Jay Gonzalez, are you able to?
Yeah, I asked Carl, I actually talked to Carl. My question was for Carl, how many units were going to be available, and how soon that turnaround is going to be for those units. How soon are we going to be looking for relief for those new workers who are going to be coming in? That's this summer. We have a workforce that's coming in this summer. Carl, when can we see a little bit of relief, and kind of if you can give us a timeline on the hotel as well, was my question.
Certainly. I'm happy to answer the question. So I anticipate that we'll be able to start construction on the Holy Trinity School site somewhere in the 6-month range. It'll take us that long to get the plans completed and then through the development review process. On the youth hostel or boutique hotel that's affiliated with that, I think a similar time range or timeline. The number of apartments in Holy Trinity School, they're working on that right now, but it looks like it could be somewhere around 40 units. It may be as low as 30, could be slightly higher than 40, 42, something like that. Somewhere around 40 units in the youth hostel or boutique hotel. And just to clarify, the Hilton Garden Inn Hotel is under construction. They're grading it right now. That's down in the La Puerta project, adjacent to the Purgatory River. That has a timeline somewhere around 14 months. So we'll be opening, we'll be wrapping it up close to this time next year. You also asked how many employees. I'm not 100% sure how many employees in the hotel. If I'm not mistaken, in their studies, it was somewhere around 40 employees there, but I can get back to you on exact numbers there, Jay.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions from the participants today that would like to speak?
Mayor, Nancy Lackey has her hand raised as well now.
Hey, Nancy?
No, thank you.
Okay, I guess that's a no.
It was Nancy Lackey.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Arrigo. The topics, I have 2 topics that I'd like to bring up. I'm wondering if council has discussed with urban renewal on how to approach funding the purchase of Cougar Canyon through condemnation, which I know is a nasty word, but the impact of condemnation at Cougar Canyon does not affect the existing residents out there, but yet it would help alleviate the amount of the dollars owed against Cougar Canyon through adjudication by the state, by a court. So if I remember correctly, there was an appraisal done on Cougar Canyon, which was, if I'm correct, was finished. And that appraisal would go to the court along with the current owner's appraisal. And the court would decide the best value or the best market value for that property. And then if urban renewal were to approach the bond market and in a way open up Cougar Canyon in phases. I'm being very general, I know, but I'm wondering, why hasn't urban renewal been approached in its ability to take on debt through the bond market for housing?
Mr. Valentine, you want to address that, please?
I can. So the appraisal was only on the hotel portion, so we don't have an appraisal on the overall Cougar Canyon property.
Well,
the city is working. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. I thought you were done. I was going to ask you a question. Go ahead, Mike.
So we've been working diligently on all aspects of what we can do with Cougar Canyon, based on a myriad of problems that are out there, legal, tax-wise, just a lot of issues out there. The discussion with the urban renewal has happened briefly, but we're not ready there yet due to all the issues that are out there. So we are working on it. We're looking for solutions, but the appraisal itself was only on the hotel property. So hopefully that answers your question.
Well, according to what Ms. Marshall told Urban Renewal several years ago, was that the appraisal was done on the whole project. So if she quoted that incorrectly, then when would you then reappraise for the entire project? Because the hotel is really, I think, a moot point when we're looking at the whole housing issue. It was also Mr. Sund who stopped the appraisal and didn't go forward so that we could get a complete appraisal. And I'm wondering if council is going to go back and do that. Cougar Canyon, setting that aside, and I don't want to take up much more time, but there's also another parcel of property where I think the city has infrastructure in, and that's the property north of Fisher Peak Elementary, where the old Jim C. subdivision, which some of us will remember. So there's a lot of property along Morse Canyon and up around the elementary school. And I know that we can't get a large developer to come in, but through a public-private partnership of some type, whether it's a subsidy or some forgiveness on infrastructure, some way to help builders. I'm wondering if even a middle-sized, a medium-sized developer wouldn't be interested in coming down and taking a look at, say that, I think there's like, what, 24 units, Mike? I don't remember, north of the elementary school. I don't know. Can you bring us up to date on that, on that whole Jim C. Old Country Club Estate site?
Sure. So the Country Club Estate was changed along the way to Eagle Rock subdivision. They platted one street and about 13 lots. They did not plat the rest of the lots. We have been working diligently trying to help developers come in. We actually called in the bonds on that development, and we have monies in escrow because of the cost of all things these days. That money did not match what needs to go in there to finish that infrastructure. It is not completed. So we are working with that. We are working with the real estate company for the Bank of Omaha, who owns that and foreclosed on that. The legal descriptions are wrong, so they're working through that. We're waiting for that process. Cougar Canyon, not to belabor that, but even if we get an appraisal, what the appraisal does is it gives us the fair market value, and if the city condemns, then we have to pay fair market value. And yeah, I don't know if we're in the business of buying that much real estate. So we're working with all developers.
Housing, you know, it's the best housing market and the future of Trinidad. Because when I have been listening to all of the developments for the downtown area, just a quick calculation, there's over 100 living units in the downtown area. And as we move forward with recreation, biking, et cetera, where are the people going to park? And I did listen to your answer on parking, but when did parking ratios to development go by the wayside? Because if a developer owns a building downtown and they want to convert to condominiums, isn't the responsibility on them to provide that necessary parking to accommodate the people going to live in their buildings?
Sure, and not to belabor it, but they didn't go by the wayside, but they are in the historic preservation district a little more, what's the word, forgiving? But anyway.
Well, how much forgiving can you have? Because it will affect downtown businesses. We already see, going into the spring and summer, we already see parking and traffic becoming an issue. So I'm wondering, what should we be doing first if we have over 100 units that are going to come before P&Z? Do we have enough electricity? Do we have enough parking? What are we creating without knowing how we're going to handle it downtown? That's, I guess, my ultimate question, as well as the vacant properties that are quasi-developed, and Cougar Canyon being the other issue. I guess I'm asking for more updates that would come from the city more regularly, because a lot of businesses, and I'll put ourselves in this position, we have people come in daily and ask, what are you guys doing for housing here? What do you guys, how do you live here? It's affecting every aspect of Trinidad, from tourism to companies moving here to hiring people, and where do you house them? We have an employee that we would like to hire, and if need be, I'm going to put her in a bed and breakfast till she can find something. That's really how critical it is. So is the cart before the horse, or are we just going to let the horse run out of the barn? I guess that's my bottom line question. And it's a long question, I know, and I know council is looking at it, but I think the city, I'm sorry, the community would really like to be kept updated on some of the solutions and what the agenda items are going to be, and how does the public know when they can come and talk about them? That's the end of my question.
Okay, one sector that we've not heard from today are the realtors. Do we have a realtor on that would like to speak on what you are seeing?
Well, I know, and I'm not a realtor anymore, Phil, but I know I talk to Kevin McIntosh regularly. He is the president of the board. He tells me that, statistically, we have no housing. We just don't have housing. And there's plenty of scrape and builds, but people that are wanting to move into houses within 30 to 45 days of their loan application approval, they can't, because number one, they can't find the contractors to help them get it livable. So it's around and around the mulberry bush.
I guess what I'm looking for from a realtor's perspective is, what kind of, or how many prospects are they getting on a weekly basis or a monthly basis that they're having to turn away. That way it gives us kind of an idea as to what's happening in that front.
Well, there's more inquiries and people to purchase than there's inventory. I do know that.
Okay.
But the issue too, Phil, is, and you were on Urban Renewal when I started, and it was a great hope that it would be able to assist Trinidad with a lot of issues, because Urban Renewal can take on debt and the city can't, according to the statute. So that's all I'm saying. I think Urban Renewal needs to be looked at more seriously rather than lightly.
Okay.
And I thank you for allowing me to make express my comments.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other comments?
Mayor, I believe it's Diane that has her hand up again.
Diane, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
This question is for Mayor Rico. I won't keep you. I'll just have a quick question. I have 2 developers that I am working with currently that are looking at coming to Trinidad and building affordable housing in City View Heights. I also have 2 properties out on the north side of town. One property is already zoned multifamily residential, and we're looking at 30 to 40 units in that property for rental units. I mentioned these developers, and I believe 1 or 2 of them might be online right now, but I believe the city in the last meeting we had mentioned, Mayor Rico, you mentioned that the city is willing to support any development that comes into town. I shared that information with the developers I'm in contact with and some of the investors, but is it possible, could you give us some specifics as to how the city is planning to assist? I don't have that information, and it would be really helpful if we were able to share with developers that we could help with some tap fees or some whatever. I'd like to know a little bit more detail on how the city is planning to support some of the new developers that come here. Thank you.
A couple of quick answers here is one is we have Wally in our economic development, and he has been keeping abreast of some of the money and credits that are available to developers if they wish to come into Trinidad. So that is one way that we can help, putting people together with a developer. The second thing is the council has discussed, we haven't gotten down to it, but we're going to have to do that rather quickly, we talked about the incentives and what kind of incentives that we could offer to developers. We've not come up with anything. We've not even had a first meeting on that, but that has been brought up. So that is something that we will be addressing here shortly. So I think that's
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That information would be really helpful. And to answer Mike's questions, I'm not a real estate agent, but I do receive at least, I'd say 3 to 5 phone calls a month from people looking for housing. And I get numerous phone calls for rentals. People don't understand. They just find me on the internet and they don't understand that we don't have rentals. But I do get quite a bit of calls, and I send those people on to different real estate agents in town. So just to answer his questions, I am getting quite a bit of calls.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Goodall.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, to carry on with what you started is we took the 4% and started setting that aside out of the marijuana tax revenue. So we have a funding mechanism in place. What Bill's referring to is we need to sit down and figure out how we're going to disperse those funds. So we've got the money starting to accumulate. We just haven't come up with the formula how we're going to disperse that money yet to help with contractors for stuff such as taps or all utilities. I just wanted to carry on a little further with what you started saying, Phil.
Okay, thank you for
Thank
that.
you, Councilman Goodall. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Let's, I see a few other council people on tonight. Do any of you have any questions for any of the people that have talked today? Go ahead, Miss Ogletree.
Thank you. In another context, not city council, but I got the chance to read a housing study for the city of Alamosa. And it went through, I think it was done fairly quickly, within probably about 6 months. I can't quite tell. It was done by a planning agency, but they went through basically and figured out what are the current and projected housing needs, what are the demographics of that city, what are the employment opportunities, what's the current housing inventory, what's the housing market conditions, and whether there are issues related to special populations such as seniors and disabled and veterans. And it basically gave the city of Alamosa a snapshot of what was necessary. And I think as city council tries to decide what to incentivize or how to incentivize, it would be extremely helpful to have a snapshot like that to figure out where we should put the money and where it should be invested. And I'm wondering if any of the developers on the line would benefit in terms of getting financing for their projects to have that kind of information at hand.
Mr. Valentine has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. We've been trying to hire a planner for some time now, and everybody's doing double duty, but Wally is actually almost finalized with the housing assessment RFP, request for proposal qualifications. That should be coming out shortly so that we can start that process, just to let you know.
Yeah,
excellent. Thank you.
I'm on the line and I've unmuted if I can say something real quick.
Sure.
It is a housing RFP for housing feasibility study, which I'm pretty sure is what Alamosa did. And we're actually using the Alamosa RFP as like the model of what we're going to be putting out ourselves. So that, honestly, we can have that ready by the next work session if that's something we do want to put up there on the high priority list.
I think that would be great. Thank you.
Any other council member have questions? Anybody else?
Excuse me. I'm sorry, Phil.
Go ahead, Karen.
I don't have a question, but I just have an observation. I think, everybody that made presentations today gave us some really good information. Some little things that the city can do right away that we can start working on to help the housing situation. What I'd like to do is, I'm assuming this is being recorded and the information that the presenters gave us are being recorded. What I'd like to have is a list of some of the recommendations and let council start acting on those or discussing what we can do on those with those first, and until we get the housing study, Aaron, and see if what's feasible in the short term. I think I know we need a housing study, but I think time is of the essence too, and if there's small changes that we can make within the city to precipitate change would be wonderful.
Ms. Grego, I jotted down some of the concerns that were brought up by each presenter, so I'm keeping track of some of the basics on those that we can talk about when we do have this discussion within council. Rhonda just posted, I saw it for a second and it went away. Ms. Epper, do you want to go ahead and speak to what you just posted?
Oh, hi. I just was letting everyone know that the Alamosa Economic Development Council is meeting tomorrow at noon. And Heather Brooks, who's the city manager, is going to be doing a quick 15-minute presentation of their housing study. So if you're interested, let me know and I can send you the link.
Okay. Do you have the, Kayvan was saying, do you have the ability to post a link there or here?
Let me see if I can find it. If I can, I'll post it.
Okay, Mr. Goodall, you had a question?
Yeah, I spoke with Mike about this a little bit, and looking at in this housing study that it would be nice to have something in there to look at what codes we may have that could be detrimental to the building of the houses, so that we know we can have something to look at, to have our recommendations to say you may want to look at making these changes in the codes. They could be detrimental to trying to get the housing built. And like Kayvon said earlier, the square footage, there's a lot of different stuff in our codes besides just 612 roof pitches, the size of the lots, the size of the houses that can be built. Stuff like that's what I was referring to, Mike, that we may need to take a hard look at getting some changes done to expedite this, like Councilwoman Grego said, to get some housing in here and up. And I know it's a double-edged sword. We're going to hear from people in neighborhoods. If we start changing who don't want it there, you're affecting my property values. And we're going to hear from the side, we need housing in here to support the workers that are coming in. And none of it's going to be easy decisions for us to make, but we've got to take a hard look at this and make some hard decisions now to tackle this problem head on, because it's only going to get worse.
One of the things that I think that might help, there's been some question in the past about, some of our codes and what we're doing, but if there are any recommendations of any developer, contractor that have concerns, my recommendation would be to either contact Mike or maybe email those questions into Mike, those concerns. And then what we could do is we could set up a work session within council to begin to address some of these issues. Are some of these issues, are we able to maybe fast track some of these issues to move things along? We don't know, but these are things that we need to look at. Like it's been mentioned, we are in a real crunch for housing, whether it's multi-housing, whether it's just individual homes, senior living, just everything, the entire gamut of housing is what we're needing. And from the numbers that I looked at, there are several, of all of the presenters today, there are several developments that are beginning to take place, whether how the city can help. It could be in some of the incentives that we need to maybe develop. So we need to begin to look at that. One of the things that was brought up was, of course, was lack of sites, cost of materials, some of the codes that we have out there maybe need to be looked at, subsidies, available monies to help the developers. Those are kind of the primary things that I jotted down that really need to be addressed. There may be some others that I may have missed, but I think that the study that Ms. Ogletree talked about, and of course Wally's working on something, I think all this stuff goes hand in hand. So I think that once Wally gets that done, maybe Mr. Valentine, maybe we can plan just a single item or a work session to have a good solid discussion on housing within council as to what can we do with incentives, how do we incentivize. The big thing is a lot of these projects that were talked about today, some of them could be fast-tracked themselves. So we as a city, we need to be able to, and like I said, fast-track maybe some of these proposals. We'll see what we could do. I just wanted to mention that I think it was a good discussion today. And I'll go ahead and address Mr. Goodall. I guess he has one more question.
Real quick, maybe it's time we need to get with Ms. McCool from McCool Industries. When the comprehensive plan is done, annexation is a big part of that. And to talk with Carrie about what direction, where we could go for annexation, where we have utilities, where it wouldn't put a strain on stuff, and see if she could give us a recommendation on an area that may go. I mean, that's why we're paying her money as our consultant, put her to work on looking at how she can help us with this, and annexation may be a part of it.
Annexation could be a part of it. I think the biggest thing is if there's anything within the city, infill, to take advantage of infill, because the cost to build within the city limits would be a lot less expensive than trying to annex, but annexation would be the next thing that we have to look at. You're correct. Mr. Valentine, do you have anything to add?
There, I think I'm unmuted now. Thank you, and I appreciate everybody's input. I would just add that, as you're trying to figure this out as a developer, builder, that you involve the city, come in and talk to us. Don't just assume that we'll never be able to do this. We'll work with you where we can within the guidelines of the documents that we have that were developed over years and years. So, and times change, so we need to be flexible and change with them as we go forward. But I just want to thank everyone for all the input.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for everyone. From what I gathered, we had about 57 participants. I think that was the highest number that we had. So there is a lot of questions. A lot of people want to know what's happening. A lot of concern with housing. Shows that everyone is interested in something happening with our housing development here in Trinidad. And I want to say thanks again for everyone that participated today, and continue the conversation with you as well as within City Council. Thanks again for listening in, and we'll stay in contact.
Thank you, everybody.